The reason I say it was an okay fit was because my favorite thing to look out for, and the most crucial thing really for me, is keeping all 3 buckles away from his TMJ, which is this structure here.
Hello everyone, I'm super excited to be giving you some tips on how to make sure that your bit and your bridle is properly fitted so that your horse can be as comfortable as possible. I see a lot of students that come to lessons or clinics and their bits aren't fitted properly, and it makes it really hard to get that nice, steady, soft, supple contact that we want with our horses. So I'm here today with Tara from equinebitfitter.com. She is an expert in bit and bridle fit, and she's going to be looking at Mercurio here today and talking to us about how to make sure that this snaffle bridle is fitted to him for optimal comfort.
Hi. Okay, so with Mercurio, overall, this is a nice bridle, but there's a couple of things. Okay, so firstly, the part about it that makes me say it's a nice bridle is that these buckles are clear of his TMJ. TMJ stands for temporomandibular joint. In horses, the temporomandibular joint is crucial for their balance and for their proprioception. It's a nerve center, and this kind of knuckle structure here on the horse's head, that is their TMJ. Just below it is where you have the kind of hinge part of the joint, which allows their jaw to move, both side to side and up and down. So TMJs are not a place that you want to have buckles, and they're not a place that you want to have tight leather and a lot of pressure. Horses generally will be a whole lot happier if you're able to get rid of that on their bridle. They'll be a lot happier under saddle. I've had people email me in the past and say, I think the biggest change from the whole fitting was just getting those buckles off his TMJ. He's a much happier horse. The other thing I notice about Mercurio's bridle, where his noseband currently sits right up against his facial crest, which is this structure here. Kind of the, how would I describe that? It's kind of like a ridge in their face. That's the facial crest. Just above the facial crest, you have the facial nerve, and it runs along the top of here, and then it comes down into the muzzle and branches off. So the facial nerve in horses is responsible for all their facial expressions, of which they have around 74. So a study has indicated. And they rely on their facial expressions a lot. They're a very, very facially expressive animal. So for Mercurio, I would probably drop this noseband by 1 hole. And you'll immediately be able to see that now he has clearance against that bone. And the whole thing just feels a whole lot looser and more relaxed on his face. The other thing you've got to be looking at with your bridle is your brow band. Many brow bands are too tight for the horses that are wearing them, and sometimes you'll see that on a horse that has large temporal muscles, which are up here. Mercurios, I wouldn't say are super large. I know I've seen much larger, but they're certainly not small either. So Mercurios feels okay to me. Typically, when I'm fitting a horse, at one point I'll just put a couple of my fingers under the attachment to the crown piece and see how much pressure I'm able to feel. If I'm able to feel pressure, you know that that horse probably needs a bigger brow band. Sometimes with your newer bridles, a brand new bridle, the whole thing hasn't yet kind of molded to the horse's face. And so if you just put some conditioning oil on this attachment here and hang it up overnight, you stand a much better chance of that molding to the shape of the horse's forehead faster. So there's not a standardized measure for brow band tightness, but the reason that it's important is because right under here and down past the ear is where the trigeminal nerve leaves the skull. So the trigeminal nerve is associated with head shaker syndrome, but there's no evidence that would prove that that has anything to do with bridle fit. However, again, it is a nerve So you probably don't want to be having too much pressure on them over there. I see a lot of these cut-out crown pieces, which is great. That's a wonderful idea. But make sure that your cutout actually cuts out round your individual horse's ears, right? The cutout's no good to them if you have the thicker part sticking right into the back of their ear. That's not comfortable for them. With the throat latch on a bridle, you also don't want a whole lot of tension and kind of gripping of the throat latch over the horse's jawbones. That's not necessary to give your bridle more security, and a lot of horses really despise the feeling of pressure against their jawbones. They need to be able, when they're being ridden, they need to be able to have full range of motion of their head, and for it to feel nice for them to move their head and to flex. And so if you're interfering with that with an overly tight throat latch, that's not a good feeling for the horse. He needs to be able to open his throat latch. At some points, they're going to need to be able to close their throat latch a little bit. So just keep that strap, you know, loose. As long as it's not flopping around and down here, you're usually fine. So the truth about bridles is, in my opinion, I don't actually think that horses fit the categories that we've always bought bridles in, right? Horse, pony, cob, warm blood. My opinion is that horses are different sizes in different areas of their face. That I find to be the case in most fittings that I do. I'd say there's only been a handful where a bridle hasn't been made up of different size parts and it's a perfect fit, right? There's usually a strap or two that need replacing. These cheap pieces here are very easy and very cheap to replace. And a brow band is typically easy and cheap to replace. Depends how blingy you want to be, right? And how much you want to spend. But all of these parts are quite easy to replace. So moving on a little bit to the bit. We can take this off for now for easier access. Hi, Mercurio. Still searching me for cookies. So his bit, what I tend to see a lot with horses that I fit is a bit that isn't tensioned correctly. What I mean by that is that the cheek piece attachment that attaches to the bridle is very loose and saggy. And so when the horse is in motion, you'll get that kind of look, right? You'll have more circle behind the cheek piece than you do ahead of it. You don't want that. You want your circle to be completely centered to your cheek piece attachment. Now, there's nothing wrong at all in also opening the lips of the horse and seeing where that bit sits. I can immediately tell you that Mercurio's is on too loose. I would probably take it up one hole on each side. I have met a few horses who, because of trauma or scarring or just a little bit of anxiety, I have met a handful of horses who prefer their bit to be just that one hole looser. And if that's the case, that's okay. But in most cases, the horse is going to benefit from its bit being a little more stable in its mouth. I tell people the horse needs to be able to find its bit. If it's flopping around in its mouth, they can't find it and kind of go to it. On a horse's mouth, their bars do narrow out as well towards the incisors. The bone gets sharper and more narrow. So again, that's not an area that you want your bit sitting on. And you don't want it to be anywhere near the canines at all. Okay, so also with your bits, there have been a few incidents lately with riders being disqualified at competitions for their bits being on the wrong way round. So it's definitely something that's being looked at a lot more by TDs and volunteers. So this is a Sprenger bit. Sprenger bits have an arrow that's engraved into one of these black circles. That arrow needs to be facing towards the incisors, towards the horse's lip. Was there any other questions you had as far as the bit, Amelia?
I guess the only other thing is, how do you know if it's the right width?
So a lot of the time as well, when I'm fitting a horse, I'll find that they're not in a bit that's the correct size for them. And this is only referring to the width size. The truth is, to correctly fit a bit, there's a lot of things you have to take into account about the horse's mouth, about the differences in each horse's mouth, because every single horse's mouth is different. But if we're just looking at width, what I like to see is clearance from bore holes. Now, if the horse is in a loose ring, I want their lips to have complete clearance from these bore holes. I know a lot of the bigger name manufacturers bevel the top of their bore holes, and that's fine. And yeah, it helps to prevent catching things. However, when I'm fitting, I would still rather give them that extra 1/4 inch that it takes for them to be completely clear of the bore holes on a loose ring. With an egg butt should fit snugly. An egg butt and a Weymouth should fit snugly, whereas your snaffle and your Bridoon should give some clearance for the lips and should typically be wider. Not all the time. You do get some horses that have very narrow muzzles, in which case your Weymouth needs to be smaller.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Tara. I learned a lot, so let me know in the comments what you learned, and also please check your bridle fit next time you go to ride your horse. It does make a big difference, and it does really help for it to be as comfortable as possible for your horse. Also, be sure to like and subscribe our channel. We post a new video every single Wednesday, and we have a lot of great educational content planned for the next couple of months. So once again, thank you, Tara. If you want more information, be sure to check out her website, equinefitfitter.com.